Okay, it looks like I may be live, and it looks like I am. Okay. So everyone let me know how the audio sounds. And we'll get started momentarily. Okay, I should be able to raise that up a bit then. I think I do think I keep my mic a bit more quiet when doing recording for YouTube videos, but that will not work for the live stream. So, okay, how does that sound? I guess I can unmute my own video. There shouldn't be any sort of feedback. I don't think I have my desktop audio streaming right now. Okay, good, good. All right then. So I've done a bit of work between this stream and the previous stream. And right now I have a very basic setup here inside the engine. For those of you who are present for the previous stream, I fixed the issues I was encountering with trying to get animations imported. And for those of you who were not, most of the time with the last stream as I started this project was spent dealing with animation issues, getting the FBX files that I was using into Unreal Engine. I have been and will be using Mogen, a essentially machine learning generative animation creation tool that you can upload your own essentially animated root bone FBX files to, and it will generate the motion on top of that. So to answer your question, the dance card that I'm using, that I use to generate motion along, the one that I'm currently using now is one from Ubisoft that they mentioned in one of their talks, and I believe the tech animator who did that talk also put a YouTube video together. I'll try to see if I can find the link, and I'll post it in the live chat. There's the link, and that is what I've been using thus far. If I go ahead and play, I don't have an idle in a motion database right now. I'm starting with it. I revamped the dance card animations that I generated in the last video, or the last stream, I mean, as there were some issues and I didn't end up following along with the dance card perfectly the first time around and only had the character turning in one direction. So I fixed that. There's a bit more coverage, but not all the coverage we need for a good system. but this is what the result currently looks like. It's not great. There isn't any sort of long looping coverage right now that I have in here. So it's just kind of working from quick starts and stops. And I don't have any sort of 180 degree or 90 degree pivots loaded in. But the initial root motion results that I am getting are better than I was encountering when I last tried root motion. So right now this is all fully root motion driven. And all I did inside this animation graph, and this is the only part that we need to pay attention to, is because the animations have root motion, just enabling root motion from everything for the defaults will allow motion matching and root motion to drive the animation of the character, which is what I want to start with, as opposed to an in-place motion match system. But I definitely want to examine both approaches. But since I'm working with limited coverage from a single basic dance card right now, I wanted to see how that would do with root motion. And I also revamped the speed that things were moving at. I don't know if I did this on stream last time, but because I've spent about 2, maybe 3 hours in total on things, trying to work things out between the last live stream and this one. And previously, the character would not start at all. It would get stuck at the very beginning of a start animation using root motion and would just really get stuck there. It's still getting stuck repeating a lot of the frames, and so that's going to be, I think, the main focus of my time in this stream is going to be getting the best results we can get out of this basic dance card. It's going to struggle on any straight length of movement at a constant velocity, I think, as well as sharp turns, because there isn't any sort of pivoting coverage. There's directional start coverage, but no pivoting coverage. It'll kind of pull from the directional starts to do pivots. And it doesn't feel super unresponsive, but this does, to me, feel quite sluggish. Especially because there's only one turning speed. And if I try to turn right now, I definitely get really stuck. So this is what the motion database looks like. I took the dance card and split it up into multiple animations, since there's a limit to the amount of frames that can be uploaded and processed in Mogen. So it's directional starts, stops, and 2 turns. These aren't currently named in order, so... Oh. I somehow completely missed that there was documentation released last week. I'm going to pull that up now because that would be incredibly useful. Oh, wow, okay. We have documentation now, great. I'm skimming through this right now. I'll leave it off to the side and reference it going forward, but I do want to see if there's anything. There's already some interesting stuff that I've scrolled past that I'll definitely want to reference. Okay, that's going to be important because I do not believe that I've done that in my motion database configuration. And the debugging section will probably be quite useful as well. That is a great point. I wanted to experiment with the AI generated stuff, which I have done, and I was thinking about pulling some Lyra animations in today. And I think I will, because I haven't done a lot with trying other types of animations. That really all I've tried in 5.3 so far, I think, are like long form dance cards that have been generated. I've done a little bit with the UUS animation set, but the Lyra animations is a great point, and so I should have that file, them ready to just migrate right over. So I'll go ahead and do that, because it does look like that's the animations they're using in the documentation, and probably internally, I agree. I am really curious to see what kind of example content they come out with. They mentioned during one of the Unreal Fest talks that was streamed that they would be doing, that there would be some sample content for motion matching with, and I think they also were saying that they were planning on that being a feature with 5.4. So I'm curious to see what direction they take that sample content in. There's some other animation stuff coming up in 5.4 as well that looks quite interesting. A new like layered blending system, and they actually added a new method of blending called dead blending in 5.3 experimentally that I was not aware of. I didn't even realize that I'd tried plugging it in, but the motion matching, you cannot select the blend type, so it just uses a standard blend, it looks like. But it's essentially a better inertialized blend that allows for less popping. During transitions between states and animations. If you transition like multiple times per frame through different states in a state machine while using inertialized blending, and that will lead you to issues, and this dead blending method resolves that, or so I've heard. I have not tried it out yet, as I only discovered that this morning. So I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I'm on a second screen. I'm navigating over to another project that I have the Lyra animations inside of. And I might as well give you guys a bit of a sneak peek while I'm here. Maybe I did misread something, but that my impression from the tweets I was seeing, I saw the initial tweet, and then Caleb Longmire had retweeted it with his own commentary. And he was the developer of the Advanced Locomotion System version 4, and from what he said, it sounded like he had really appreciated in the dead blending method. Okay, so okay, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys what I have cooking with the Advanced Character Locomotion series while I have the project open. My plan is to provide project files with Lyra animations through a Patreon for this project and other projects on the channel going forward. So I do have a version fully working with the Lyra animations that is all feature complete except for jumping, that I do plan on providing through a Patreon. I haven't decided on subscription tiers and prices, but my plan is to do that with a early video access and project file access. But I have everything working with Lyra animations. It's almost ready to go. I've just been going through and putting comments everywhere. So Things will be a bit more organized than the project files that you're seeing on the channel itself in the videos, but I will be going back. I haven't encountered any issues with anything I've put out in videos so far that cause things not to work with the Lyra animations, but I am considering putting out a video showing you guys how to do a couple expansions to the systems to make things like the hip-facing tracking toggleable, which I've done in this project to allow for the limited coverage of the Lyra animations to work with the system compared to the UUS animation set. So I'll likely put that into a video of its own so that you guys can do that work too and see the process that I went through getting this project ready as a downloadable. But it'll probably still be a week or two until all that's ready to be officially announced with its own dedicated video. Oh, I think Yep, there they are. So I have all the unarmed Lyra animations here. And so all the functionality that I built on top of the UUS animation set will be in that project. It'll just be disabled, like the spin state, for example, will be disabled for the Lyra animations. Since it doesn't have dedicated spin animations. Okay, we're now migrating the Lyra animations. Okay, yep, here we go. So it would definitely be possible to have different stances with motion matching. There's so previous to the current release of Unreal Engine, there is a data asset type that would allow, I believe, gameplay tags to be sort of aligned with or mapped to, that's the word I was looking for, mapped to motion database configurations, or just motion database assets, I mean. So you could split out your animations and group them together under gameplay tags, and then using those tags, switch the animation sets you were playing back in the animation blueprint, and it was a system built around that. They've now switched that over into an experimental plugin called Chooser, which is built around dynamically swapping out just animations at runtime and built for that. It'll work with motion matching. Last I checked, there may be documentation on it now if there's documentation for motion matching, but I could not find very many or any resources on it, so I haven't looked into that, but that will probably be a key component that will be used with motion matching to facilitate different modes of movement or using different separated out database sets. Motion matching, really, because it is integrated into the same animation system as everything else. You can take a motion matching node, put it inside a state machine. You can, anywhere you'd play a sequence player, you could do motion matching, essentially. It fits into the whole animation graph system, so anything you could do with a sequence player system, you could likely do with motion matching. eventually. That's not to say that you'd be better off doing it with motion matching. In a lot of cases, you might be. In a lot of cases, it might be just make more sense to use a sequence player and play an animation sequence. It all depends, but you shouldn't be constrained on what you can do with motion matching. It should only add more possibilities based on how you use it. So with these animations here, I'm going to start by just creating a basic motion database, and I'm just going to chuck everything into it. And we will very, very likely need to pull animations out and separate them into different databases. But I just want to see how it handles the Lyra coverage to start with. Created the wrong asset type. I was meaning to create a configuration there. And I'll leave the config as with its default values. And we'll adjust them as we need to. I'm going to go back to no root motion extraction. And actually, I need to do this in a different animation blueprint with a different skeleton. So I'll just should be able just to reparent this animation blueprint, a duplicate of it. Let's see. Not what I'm looking for. Let's. Yep, that was it. So the motion matching animations that you've seen at the beginning of this stream, I generated using Mojin, which is essentially a machine learning tool that can generate animations, locomotion animations. So I was trying that out in the previous stream. We'll come back to using it, I think, in the future. It's an extremely useful tool. I'll eventually make a dedicated video and condense the knowledge that I will be acquiring as I continue to go through this motion matching journey through these live streams, and I'll be condensing as much as I can down into some dedicated videos. But it'll probably still be some time because there's a lot to learn and discover here. We got a crash there. Let's try that again. Nope, that does not want to open up, so it's probably, yeah. I'm going to, where'd it go? I'm in the other project again. That's why I wasn't recognizing the file structure. This one hadn't restarted yet. I'll go ahead and close out of this too. So I'm just going to co-opt the Manny animation blueprint. There are some additive animations in that file, I think, and that's what's causing the shrinking. I didn't consider that when I just brought everything into the database. And I'll go ahead and pull the turn in place out. That'll likely need to be its own state or be, not motion matched. And the crouches will definitely be separated out into a separate database. Be interesting to have the idle breaks in here. I guess there weren't any additives. Oh wow, and we crashed again. I wonder what's happening. Something with the anim graph and control rig, potentially. I don't know. We'll see if we keep running into crashes. If we do, I can start from a fresh project with the Lyra animations. For those of you who have just joined and missed the beginning of the stream, I just migrated the Lyra animations into this project, and I'm going to be attempting to do some motion matching with them in 5.3. Well, we will resolve that issue when we get to it, whatever's happening there. Right now I need to get the trajectory from the character. So get property access, and if I get the owning actor, I can cast that to the third person character, which I've added the trajectory component to in a previous stream. Then I will return the trajectory. Back in the animation graph. Oh, I'll make this a pure function, I almost forgot, and set the output to be named return value. I'll grab a property access. I guess I really don't need to do that. I can just pull the variable out. Or function, I mean. I'm not too worried about optimization right now. And I'll just get the trajectory. It's in world space, but I believe that is working properly with the motion matching anim node in 5.3. So with some testing that I did, it did not appear that we need to convert the trajectory from world space to local space, like what was done previously. Oh yeah, it has to be thread safe in the enum graph, that's why. I guess my brain is moving a little bit slow today. Just write initially to use property access for that. Ah. I believe that was because I had the animation blueprint assigned to a different skeleton selected when I switched the skeletal mesh, but I would not expect that to crash the engine. I was just going to expect that to clear that out. And I'd select a proper one. That was weird. If I really don't understand what's causing that, there must be an additive or something just being played. Yep, and it is choosing to play idle breaks. Right now we are we're rotating to face our movement direction. And I guess I didn't get all the crouch animations out of there. Let's go ahead and clean up that database. I'll go ahead and just take everything out but to the jogs and idle. Oh, yep, I missed some crouch animations. Missed a lot of crouch animations, I'm surprised. Surprised it isn't choosing a jogging animation. Wow, we're getting a lot of crashes. Post search is crashing. Interesting. It's still experimental, so it might not be completely stable. Though this is the first time I've had motion matching crash the engine since I've started working with it in 5.3. I look at the documentation and scroll up. What it looked like to me was, and yeah, these animations look like Lyra animations, but there is a whole lot more coverage here in this thumbnail than what was in Lyra. There's snaking, turns, full range of movement, speed up between walking and jogging. So there definitely are internally testing with short clip animations similar to or based on the Lyra animations, but that jog right there looks just like a Lyra one. So to me it looks like they extended the Lyra animation set internally. Okay, I'll try, I'll give that a shot. Oh, I already did try that. So it is currently disconnected. So we are working with less coverage than we are than Epic has internally. And we can definitely really see that. I'm going to... What I want to see is how orientation warping works in graph mode placed after motion matching. I want to see how much it can make up for on its own if motion matching chooses to play a forward-facing animation, for example, while moving at an angle. So I will reconnect this control rig. Yep, so it is orientation warping properly based on the root motion of the animations being selected. Though it is not currently taking the facing of the animations into account at all times. As we can certainly see here, unless I forgot in the engine. Maybe the engine crashed on me before I checked. Yep, I did not check use control rotation yaw. That's actually the issue. We'll go ahead and save everything and open up these two assets. So that jog walk blend space is where the walk animation is being chosen from. Because now we're jogging. And so it does not want to pivot, which is all right and expected. It stays in the loop fairly well. And I'm going to set some ground movement speed settings back to their defaults. Well, I'm going to set the max walk speed to 400. But I think I have braking deceleration turned down quite low. Or not. It definitely seems like it's playing the animation a bit more quickly. Which does make me wonder. I don't think. No, it's at the min and max play rate of 1. Maybe I'm just not used to working with Lyra animations, so they look faster than the animations I've been working with recently. So what we can do to get it to act more in the way we want it to is to give it some states and different motion databases, similar to how we'd set up a normal movement system. So I'll go ahead and reconnect the basic setup that has these two state machines here. I'll cut motion matching, and I'll leave this idle state here. I'll add a start state. I'll add a loop state, and I'm going to add a pivot state. Well, not pivots yet, stop, actually. And so we don't know exactly which animations we're playing and when, so we can't have any animation-dependent transition conditions. So idle to start, we can use the standard like Boolean based off of acceleration from the character movement component. Do the inverse of that for stop. So for stop to idle, I can just see if the ground speed is equal to 0. Actually, motion matching, I think we can get away with just having a database as stop animations and idle together and just stay in a permanent stop state until we begin moving again. I think that's going to be the way to go with this. Might help keep things a little bit simpler. So, heck, we might even be able to condense stop and start into its own database configuration. Because should be smart enough to choose the correct animations, where if we get our config set right, it should be able to go along with the increasing velocity and decreasing velocity of starts and stops together. So potentially start, stops, loops, and loop being, so starts and stops being a state, looping being a state, and then pivoting being a state. And we could like have a function bound to a motion matching node and just swap out motion database configurations, but I'll just go with the state machine approach for now. We can look into that maybe a bit later, but so dead blending is apparently in 5.3. I can place a node in a graph, but it is not in this drop down here. So I was going to try to get that up and running, but I'll just stick with inertialization for now. So for start to loop, we also have the predicted trajectory of the character, so we can perform logic based on the point in the trajectory, which could be really helpful for pivots and just like, because eventually in like a proper full coverage setup, you probably have some quick pivots for like 90-degree pivots and also spins you might all be able to put in the same kind of state. Depending on your system and how it's working, I'm thinking, I guess right now, more in terms of a non-strafing system. And then essentially look at the points in the trajectory and try to look at how close they are to being on a straight line. And if the angle between points in the trajectory is great enough, then you know to use the motion database that has all your pivoting and quick change movements. is definitely a way to do it. So for start to loop, I'm just going to get this ground speed, and I'll see if it's equal to, and I'll get the character movement component's max walk speed. So I'll make a function to get the character movement component. We'll get property access. I'll get the owning actor. Actually, no. I'll get the pawn owner's movement component and cast that to a character movement component. I'm just going to stick for now with all like standard character movement variable based transition rules because that's what I'm most familiar with. I do want to eventually experiment with creating transition rule sets or database selection rule sets based on the predicted trajectory, but I don't want to get too far ahead. I'd like to get something basic up and running as soon as possible with Lyra coverage. I might bring in animations from the UUS animation set because that has a heck of a lot more coverage in its blend spaces for motion matching. So I may do that during this stream as well, depending on what kind of initial results we get with the Lyra animations. I think trajectory-based rules will definitely be much more robust with motion matching. I'm expecting that we'll encounter issues because when turning, the speed will slow down. It should stay in loop if there's acceleration, though. So that should be all right, but I'd prefer to do like a start to loop based on like the last point, the furthest back point in the trajectory, if that, like the velocity of that point compared to the current point, or you could do a sort of trajectory-based calculation too. Like once the point furthest back in time has a non-zero velocity, you move to loop. I don't know. There's all sorts of logic you could run on the locations, having the access to location and time values from a trajectory of both past movement and predicted future movement. But I haven't really tried to come up with anything smart or intelligent or better than the way I've normally been setting up these sorts of states. So if I come up with anything that I think will be a whole lot better, I might try it, but I'm going to try to stick with what I do know instead of spending too much time during this stream trying to think up of trajectory component based transitions in locomotion state machines, since that isn't the main focus of what we're doing here at all. I just renamed this motion database to be Lyra Loop, and I'm going to take everything just that isn't a looping animation out of this. And I'm going to put a motion matching node in each of these states. I would definitely like to look at a system where the motion database is selected based on criteria and a function bound to a motion matching node instead of states, because the state logic kind of inherently introduces a chain that you might have to follow, like you have to be in start before you can get into loop. And as these graphs expand, that can get more complicated. And with motion matching, it's kind of inherently a process where it's jumping all around through the database, finding the right piece of the right animation to play next. So something a bit more freeform where you can go into any database from any other database just based on what's happening for the current frame would fit much better, because you're not going into a state where you wait for a full animation to play. You're in a state where this whole system is in a state where it's always just choosing the next little piece to play. And a lot of times that is going to be the next frame of the next animation, or of the current animation, I mean. Ideally, that's what you want. You want it to stay in the same animation for as long as it can, as often as it can usually. But there is a bit of a disconnect between this state-based approach and maybe it's not that big of an issue, and I'm making it out to be bigger than what it will be, but I'm just trying to share my thoughts to you guys as I have them. Otherwise, I'd be awfully quiet over here. Though I am getting a little bit off track and haven't done much in the last minute or so. Do I still have that copied? No. So I'll have to use property access to get the trajectory again. I never thought to paste the nodes I'd copied, and copied something else since then. Okay, so now motion databases. I'll copy this loop one and I will name it start. And I'll create a stop motion database. And this is again going to have the idles and then stops instead of starts. So for anyone who may have not been here for a while, or who has joined the stream recently, I'm currently trying to set up the Lyra animations with motion matching. And I had something else I was going to mention other than that really obvious thing, but my mind blanked out, so never mind. I'll mention it if it comes to mind and is important. Now I'll go ahead and select the databases. So stop, start, and loop. So there we started. We're in the loop database, and now we've stopped. The camera movement kind of stuff is definitely something I'd like to look into eventually, because I've always... The camera is such an important overlooked component of these sorts of these systems, and can be really important in establishing the feel. So there's definitely a good chance I get to that eventually. It's definitely a topic I'd like to cover, but I'll need to really look into setting things up and figuring out a good system for that before I cover it on the channel. I'll probably get to that maybe not in the super near future, but definitely not in the far future either, for a game project I'm working on. So maybe as I'm doing that, I'll start to do some videos on that topic, because it is definitely a great idea for something to cover on the channel. Yep, and that's one issue. The transitions aren't syncing properly because we're in different state machines, so we're not able to, I think, take advantage of motion matching, maybe moving from state to state. Wow, this project really likes to crash on me. I wonder what's going on with it. It's been a while, so hopefully it doesn't keep doing it so often. Otherwise, we'll need to create a new project here. So there may be a way to start this from a matching pose. All right, well then, back to the anim graph. I'm just going to plug this into the locomotion pose. And I'm going to promote this database to a variable. And I'll go ahead and create a function. Actually, no. I'm not going to promote the database to a variable. Instead of running a function on update, I'm going to set the database to be a dynamic value that isn't exposed as a pin. Might as well bind the trajectory as well. And with that set to dynamic, I'll go ahead and create an update function, which I'll name select motion database. And now I'll go ahead and get the trajectory. And I'll likely use it in multiple places, so I'll make it a local variable. Break the struct, it gives me an array, and I can get a for each loop. That's going to give me If I break this, we get the facing as a quaternion, the position, and the time. So if any position is if any it's relative to the character's current position, so figuring out if it's static in world space. I was going to okay, so my initial thinking was that I'd have some logic that if any position what I was really thinking of was velocity. If the velocity of a point in the trajectory is 0, then the character, then we use a database that has starts and stops. We could look at angles between points for pivots, and all build this out of the same motion matching component, so we're always motion matching between our databases as we switch between them. I was thinking in terms of velocity, though, and of course, to create velocity, we need to take at least 2 positions. So the logic here might be a bit more complicated, and I want to try to keep it as simple as possible. So I think I could go about calculating the velocity of a point based on the points around it, but I'm not going to bother. I don't want to bother with that. I know there has to be a simpler way to determine if we should be, either starting or stopping or using a transitional movement state where we have that's going to be it. Though I think under this rule set, this is going to get chosen while we are turning as well. But instead of basing this on this start-stop database, which I think I'm going to combine on trajectory, I'll base it on a physically calculated acceleration. So notifies and curves won't work for the kind of logic I'm trying to run right now, because I want to base my logic off of the movements of the character, because this logic is being used to select the animation that's going to be played, as opposed to there isn't already an animation. We don't want to build any logic based on the animation that's being played, because this logic needs to be able to, under any circumstances, select the motion database that we're going to play. So it has to be based on just data about the character that we have, separate from any animation being played back by the character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, through property access, get the velocity of... Okay, velocity is already a variable, so I don't need to get it from through property access, it looks like. So I'll get velocity, and I'm going to... Okay, yeah, I'm going to get this variable in the event graph. I'm going to calculate a physics-based acceleration variable, or acceleration value. So the character movement component's acceleration is just used to essentially increase velocity over time, and then velocity is clamped. So it's not an actual representation of velocity of the change in velocity over time. So I'm just going to get the difference between previous velocity and divide that result by delta time, and that will allow us to get acceleration is a physical value, so it'll zero out when our velocity is constant and be a non-zero value when our velocity is not constant. We already have a reference to the movement component, so I did not need to create that function. It's been a while since I've worked out of the third-person character templates animation blueprint as a base. I usually just start from scratch these days. Might as well just calculate that up here too. It makes sense to do it along with the other velocity calculations. So now, if the vector length of acceleration is equal to 0, or I'll say in range, I'll get the magnitude of the vector on the xy axis, actually. And I'll just say if that absolute value of that magnitude is less than 50, might be a good number. And that'll be our condition for choosing a motion database that contains starts and stops. And I think pivots as well. I think that's the approach I'm going to try. So I'll delete the start database. And I'll rename this to motion database Lyra transitional movement. It wasn't doing a good job of selecting pivots on its own, or I might not be able to tell pivots from stops and starts, so I'll leave starts and stops in its own database, because it is going to have an issue choosing when to use pivots and when to use starts and stops. So I'll do this motion database Lyra start stop. And I'll go ahead and toss the idles in as well. I'll just do the idle ready animation. So if the acceleration is less than 50 and our ground speed is not equal to 0, and we're going to choose the start stop motion database. Otherwise, we're going to choose the loop database. And that's going to be if ground speed is not equal to 0. So if that's false, then we're going to be idling. So I still need to have that in its own database, but that's fine for now. Actually, I don't think we need to do that. We'll just choose between these two. Looks like we can't call an update function like that on the motion matching node, which is very interesting. Oh, because I added a return value that should not be there. I'm definitely am thinking a little bit slow. No wonder. Did it really delete? It deleted the function. No, it didn't. It didn't. It's still there. And why isn't it there? Because I added a return value. Got to get rid of that. And now, there we go. What I should have done is I should have gotten this node input, convert to motion matching node, and promote that to a local variable. I accidentally made that a global variable. I'll try that again. You can have it search multiple databases. That's interesting. So there's definitely more that could be done here. I think maybe a reset database to search might... No. Maybe I should call a reset and then a set. I'm, at this point, guessing. We'll see if this works. And maybe... I'm going to try doing this without a reset. And I'll check that force interrupt if new, I guess. And well, let's see if this works. It does not. And debug this value. Value seems to be functioning properly, so I think I know what the issue in my logic is. Oh, and I have my logic kind of inverted here. The yeah, that's I got myself turned around backwards with my logic. It should be this way around. Yep. Now it's choosing things a little bit better. It's a bit jumpy when it chooses a start animation, but it's been like that the whole time. And of course, doesn't really know what to do with the angles and struggles more with that because of the limited coverage of the Lyra animations. So I think I'm going to look at now is something with more coverage. And of course, we could work on the settings a bit more, but I'd rather, because we're dealing with strafing here and not forward-facing, strafing is inherently a lot more complex, and I think to motion match well, we'd need more coverage than the Lyra has, especially if you look at like the kind of coverage Epic seems to have with their extended set. They have that GIF of. So I'm going to pull an animation set with even more coverage. The unarmed upright strafing animation set, which is on the Unreal Engine Marketplace. It has start, stops, pivot, spins, loops, and those animations all work together in a blend space without any sort of foot sliding. Which means that we can get full 360-degree coverage for start, stops, loops, and pivots with these animations. I'm migrating them now. I had the other project open on my second screen. Okay, here we go. We should get significantly more coverage with all of these. Oh, I should. Oh, hey, Ryan. For those of you who don't know, Ryan, who just sent a message in chat, is the creator of the UUS animation set. So this kind of looks good, but I'm just going to, for the heck of it, up the number of horizontal samples to, let's say, has to be an odd number. We won't get the right on axis stuff. 31. It's overkill, but too bad. Mirror as well, maybe. Yeah, well, 17 is definitely plenty. And mirroring, I don't think, is really necessary. So I'll stick with 17 horizontal samples, and these are walk jog blend spaces. So vertically, okay, so horizontally, we do not need all of these. I was getting a bit ahead of myself. We have the same coverage in these two as we do in all the others. Yep, so we're going to up vertical and horizontal. I'll do 31 horizontal and 17 vertical. Maybe 17 vertical is overkill. I think it is. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is. 5 is probably a better number to give us a good enough range. Since there is not a walk to jog animation specifically, but using the blend space, it should do quite well. And walks and jogs are together in this. It might cause issues. I'm not going to worry about it yet. I need to separate them out and use the gate specific blend spaces. I will. That was too many samples. I think these animations will benefit from is some different values in the acceleration and deceleration of the character, I think. my condition that I had set up there is definitely causing it to choose that transitory start-stop state when turning. So I think splitting pivots out might be the best way to go. Really, I'm just trying to iterate through and experiment through ideas as quickly as possible, everyone, because I'm learning just as much as you guys are when it comes to the motion matching stuff. It is not my area of expertise, since it is new to me and new to the engine. Okay, I might go back to that approach then. Good question. What is motion matching? So, motion matching is a technique where you have a database of animations, and the system, based on some form of criteria, usually bone position and velocity, and a past and predicted movement trajectory, that information is used to select the next frame or portion of an animation to play from a database. So it can simplify the process. Yep, okay, that does make sense, and that's what I was kind of seeing in some of my initial testing with a more forward-facing system using an AI-generated animations based on a Ubisoft dance cards, a couple of them, that I tuning those weights in config settings definitely had a big effect, as well as the motion matching node itself. So I'll pull back the locomotion state machine and take advantage of the UUS animation sets, better blend space coverage, and give it some start, stop, and loop specific state databases, and then I'll do a pivot one as well. .4, I believe they said that would be like coming out along with during GDC of next year. That was, I'm not sure if it was, I'm not sure if I'd say it was offhandedly mentioned, but like that was kind of mentioned as being the GDC release, that there'd be more info at GDC or something like that during the Unreal Fest streams that they had up on YouTube. I think the last one on one of the last talks on one of the last days. So whatever GDC is, it's sometime in March, I think. Like early to mid-March of next year is when we'll be seeing either a preview or full release of 5.4. If it's a full release, the preview would come a few months earlier. So that's what I've heard, at least, or what was said, to my recollection, during Unreal Fest. Yep. Nope. That's just from what I saw in the streams Unreal had going on the Epic had going on the Unreal YouTube channel. I didn't watch all the talks that they had streamed, but I caught a few that piqued my interest, and like one of them was just like I can't remember which stream because they had 3 concurrent streams running for 3 days in a row, but on the third day, the last talk in one of the streams covered like what was coming up for the engine, the same stuff they put on that they updated the Unreal Engine roadmap with, not designated to a specific release. Like apparently they, during in 2 separate instances, they said like they equated the Mover 2.0 coming with 5.4, which surprised me, and that would be a completely revised character movement component that can be added to, I think, like any actor or pawn, and it's more generic and much better overall than the current character class specific implementation, which has me really excited. So it seems like 5.4 is going to be a big character movement, character animation release for the engine, from the information I've come across, just from things being mentioned in the Unreal Fest streams. I'm not sure. I just know that it was the last talk. I want to say in one of the day 3 streams. It was mentioned in it. I can't recall which. I like my gut is saying the second or the third, leaning towards the third, but for all I know, it could be the first, and I could be completely off on that. But I know it's the last talk in one of the 3 day 3 streams. So inside this loop database, I'm going to try tossing in some of the spins just to see what happens. It's not going to be too structured as far as any sort of desired hip facing for right and left strafing, but I just want to see what motion matching chooses to do. Well, maybe I'll try that in a bit. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, and I can tell I'm already starting to. So last thing, I need to get the idle into the start and stop database. I did not do that. That's another thing. There's no need, I think, to have any transition duration here. So yeah, it is not motion matching from one state into the other. There's probably a way to get that to work properly. We'll try to figure that out. I don't see anything. There might be possible to do it on like a bound function to a node. But guess I'll just turn up that blend duration to something small, maybe like 0.15 with fast feet set as the profile. It definitely gets stuck going from start to the looping state. Well, not really stuck, but it's not motion matching between states. If it won't motion match between states, I guess I'll need to go back to the single node approach if I don't want to sync or figure out some way to get these. I mean, I don't know if there is a way to get these to sync. There's no sync group settings for the motion matching node, which that does make sense. Maybe that should search boolean. I said that. No, I don't think that'll work either. Yeah, it needs to be, I think, an instant switch. Let's see if the vector length, 2D vector length, if that's less than 0 for acceleration, we know we are slowing down and we should be stopping. If the inverse is true, we know we're speeding up. Acceleration is going to go to some. It's going to change a lot as we turn while moving, and we don't want to accidentally go into start or stop, so we can we could get the difference in yaw frame to frame, and if that is over a certain threshold, force it to stay in the looping state. Oh. Yeah, I could go about this in a much better way. I should have thought of this a lot sooner, everyone. I should just use the character movement acceleration here, even if I'm not doing it in a state machine. Because if that is true, and ground speed is not equal to max walk speed, then we start. Otherwise, if should move is true, we loop. Otherwise, we're stopping. I think that logic should work. It is definitely matching between databases now as we swap, which is good. It is really getting stuck in that start, though. I think. And instead of not equal, I'm going to do a less than. Okay. I was running into just now with the state machine blending, but things not being synced very well. Like it wasn't basing the last pose it was doing off of the previous pose all that well. If I can break it out of whatever it's stuck in here. It does seem to be choosing a matching pose this time around. The starts seem like they really aren't working all that well. So I'm wondering if something is wrong with my logic, or if I'm just need to adjust some configuration settings. So if ground speed is less than max walk speed and we should move, then we start. If that is false, so yeah, state machine structure would work better for this logic, but I can't get it to match the pose between states, where it does seem to, at least for me right now in this version, unless it just looks like it is right now, match the pose from the previous database to the next. Okay, this is going to be really hacky. It's an idea. There has to be a much, much, much better way to do this, because I really don't like this idea at all. But I could create events for these states and use the events to set the database configuration for a motion matching node. But then the state machine is going to contribute to the final pose, and it won't be in it, and then I'd have to get even hackier with my approach and do some sort of layered blend per bone with no bone selected to even make the state machine valid to the final pose, so it calculates through, and that's just feels wrong on a lot of levels to be that convoluted. There has to be a proper way to go about this. I should... Oh. Ryan, thank you so much. That is my exact issue. I forgot about the post search node. Wow. I'm very surprised I forgot about that, but I'm disappointed in myself now. The post search node is definitely what is going to post history. That is going to facilitate being able to do the matching between states. Gosh. How did I forget about that? It's like the core part, critical part of this. Yep, there we go. Exactly what I needed. Well, thanks again, Ryan. I appreciate it. So now, pivots. Yeah, I'd definitely like to try dead space blending. I'm going to need to pull up that tweet and see if I can see any details on how they got it set up. I saw they put the node in. So is it just selecting inertialization, but then having a dead space node instead of inertialization? An inertialization node, maybe? That might be it, because there was no... yeah, there was no dead space drop-down option, just a standard and inertialized blend option. Oh. Yeah, it's called dead blending. It's just dead blending. That was, yeah. I think I might have said dead space blending. I don't know why, because that does sound like the name of that game. I mean, you have different spaces in 3D. But yeah. I have a feeling I might have been the one who started it, and then I've just been, people continued to refer to that. Refer to it as that in chat, and then a self-repeating cycle, and none of us realized I was likely the one who caused it. Okay, so I'm going to try to figure out how this works. I'm going to set the blend duration to 0 and leave this on standard, and I want to see if any blending occurs. Does not look like it. Okay, good. So now if I give this a duration and put that to inertialization, I'm not sure if we'll be able to tell if it's doing the dead blending. There is no dead blending option, so I'm just going to hope that having inertialization selected will use dead blending. Unless I'm just completely missing something here. Take another look at that tweet. He was using a blend poses by bool. So I just want to check its dropdown. Just standard and inertialization. I'm going to guess, actually, inertialization is selected and it is blending without an inertialization node in the graph, but with a dead blending node, which means that it should be using dead blending, and you just have to have inertialization selected. So maybe that is it. So maybe, Ryan, you won't need to, I don't know. Yeah, no, I guess you're accessing more functions than just, yeah, you're actually, requesting an inertialized blend into stuff, so never mind. I was going to say maybe, based on the node that's in the graph, it would just do either inertialization or dead blending, and the function calls would be the same. That'd be kind of convenient on the coding side if it was, but you'd have a better idea of whether or not that would be the case than I would, because you're the one who's done work in C++ on the animation side of things. I have not. I'm going to set the pose jump threshold time to, I think, 0.15. Leave the search throttle at 0 for at least the start. It seems to get itself a bit stuck in the start. It is still kind of hitching during that transition between start to loop. We are tracking a pose history, but we aren't collecting bones. I wonder. The biggest hitch seems to be from start to loop. Loop to stop is working just fine. I'm kind of curious. Just do that. And pull the start out. And if I throw the starts into the loop database, I wonder how good of a job it would do. Because I'm already treating, stop and idle as the same thing, as the same state. That looked pretty nice. I was getting a bit confused about whether the hips should be forward or backward facing. While I'm here, I might as well. I need to get the updated UUS animation set. I'm still have 5.2 everywhere on my computer. And I think having that extra coverage will set things up using these animations to there's more forward and backward facing angles available and more spins. So I'll just add it to this project and swap things out eventually. Maybe not in this stream, but maybe between this one and the next. We'll eventually get back to the Mojin stuff, but I want to try to get something working with these animations and with just high coverage. Because the only issue that we're going to encounter, I think, right now is that sort of spin between backwards facing to forward facing, and it going back and forth occasionally. Like we'll have pivot coverage worked in, but and it's kind of getting caught up on itself with the turning, because there isn't any turning specific coverage. So that's going to be up to config kind of thing, probably. Maybe trying to find a way to put less emphasis on that to keep it in the loop. And that might just be lowering the weight. The cost for looping, I mean. A little bit better, not perfect. I think we have walk jog blend spaces in here, and that might be convoluting it. So what I'm going to do is just switch over to jog only for all of these. I'm not using the start. I'm using stop though. So pull walk stop out of the stop and then in the loop. Or was I using the start? Oh no, I'm in the wrong folder. That's the Lyra specific ones, not the US anim set ones. Okay, so it did get the 5.3 update of the USCNM set in here. And that does provide a full loop for hips forward and hips backward. So, okay, I'm going to use these, because that will make things a lot easier. So animations, so demo. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit. No need for the UE4 animations in this project. So this animation set has its own copy of the Unreal Engine 5 mannequin, so I'm just pulling that out and reparenting these animations to the mannequin that was already in the project. And I will not be streaming for too much longer. I didn't want to go too far past the 2-hour mark. I'll try to wrap things up relatively soon here. I was half expecting that crash. I'm going about things the somewhat lazy way of just force deleting assets that are being referenced, including those motion database assets, since I'll be using the extended coverage from the 5.3 update of the set. So maybe I'll go about this the proper way and create the databases I'm replacing the references to first. So I am going to separate out the walks and the jogs. I'm going to I'm creating new blend spaces. Really? I did this on 0 to 180 instead of 0 to 90 for the range. We need to fix that. And make it negative 90 to positive 90. It's close enough if they snap to the grid. There we go. Copy that. That'll be hips backward start for jogging. And now these stops should have separate, yep, they do have separate to jog blend spaces. And so do the loops. So now I can move on to the database. So for the start database, I'll throw in the idle again and the start jog blend space. And I'll combine loop into the start database as well. And there are the actually, that is going to need to be a separate blend space for what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to take the hip facing into account. Or actually, no. Yeah, I'll need to do that, yeah. So that is going to be its own database. Again. So there's a hips forward loop and a hips backward loop database. going into the wrong folder. And sorry, everyone, I know I've been quiet. I apologize. I'm sure it's not that entertaining or fun to watch right now. That's on me. Okay, there we go. So now back to our anim graph. We have all the databases we need for now, and for this stream, certainly. So add a state machine, loop state machine, and I think I'm going to end it out before we get to the next phase of this. Okay, sure, go ahead and ask your question. So right now there isn't any sort of turning specific animation coverage or a snaking movement for looping, so I'm just setting the loop state up with these two blend spaces, and we'll get more full advantage of motion matching with maybe starts and stops. So that is my thinking, but instead of continuing on this path, which is just going to be inevitably lead to a somewhat more complicated state machine setup with UUS animation set animations, I may, between this stream and the next, do some more work, reference that documentation, and either pick up where we left off, try to finish off this kind of strafing motion match system, or switch back to the forward-facing AI-generated animation system. Because we kind of started with the Lyra animations, moved to the UUS animations. We got some good results with the UUS animations, so I didn't spend much time looking at them from the bit we saw. I think the result looked pretty good for the amount of time I put into it. And I think it's just going to come down to a lot of motion database configuration tweaking and coverage if we want to go for the AI root motion, AI generated animation, root motion match setup route. So I'd be happy to hear everyone's thoughts in the Discord server as well between now and then, because there are kind of two branching paths we could take with these motion matching focused streams, where I'm just trying to practice at motion matching and wrap my head around it. I see that you've sent your question, Shadowfall, so I'll go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so that is something that you could set up by going into where you handle your movement and camera input. So here you have where it'll handle camera input based on the input action for looking specifically. So with a thumbstick or a mouse. What we'd be interested in is this add controller yaw input. So then when move is triggered, and we could take the value of this X, and we could plug it in directly and give it some sort of modifier, but you'd essentially take the left, right, A and D value, which I believe is on a -1-to-1 range, so it should work well, and just tie that into a controller yaw input, and that does create some yaw when the A and D keys are pressed if you'd want to have it turn while moving, which is what a lot of games will do. I'm not sure if that was exactly what you're asking as far as turn in place goes. I did cover that in my most recent video, and it's not tied to like the input or the way you're managing camera input in any way, so it's just tied to the state of the camera and character facing. So it should work with a variety of different camera control methods. But if you were going after the kind of approach where if you're strafing to the side, the camera rotates as well, that's how you could achieve it. You could just apply some sort of modifier to that input axis value. You'd have to do it a bit. You might have to apply a different modifier for a controller, maybe 0.3 might look nice. And additionally, I think some camera lag enabled. Okay, so hmm. Oh, I got it. I missed part of your initial question, which kind of threw me off. So I see. So your A and D isn't always affecting movement in some way. If my understanding is correct, then it would really, that aspect of it would come down to how you set up your input handling in the character. So if you want certain situations where you don't want A and D to affect movement for right and left, you would add in like a boolean that could control it. If sometimes it does, I'm not sure what your input setup is like. And if that is true, then it'll allow you to set that movement. If it's false, then it won't. And of course, you need to make sure you're always handling like forward and backward. If W and S are always doing that, I'm not sure. But that kind of comes down to input configuration. And then on the animation system side, so tying it to, so the kind of overall system and the way it adds root yaw offset works, but if you, if the character is always aligned with the camera, you should be able to use the actor's yaw, but you could possibly be able to use the camera yaw as well under some situations, but it's hard to answer the question about going about it in a different way without knowing more about your specific setup. So if you want to send me a message in my Discord server, I can throw the link into the live chat. I can we can talk more, and if we can go into more detail on any more details that I might need to give you a better response than what I can give you right now, because it's just hard to provide that sort of response without knowing more of the specifics. Because like in Unreal Engine, there's so many different ways to do everything that I don't want to just give you one way off the top of my head, making guesses about what you're trying to do and how your setup is. because there's such a broad spectrum of approaches that can be taken. I could probably give you some more specific advice and guidance on how to go about going in the right direction on that kind of stuff and adjusting these steps in my video to match up with whatever you are trying to accomplish. I don't have time to hop into voice chat and right now, because my stream is already going a little bit over further than I planned, and I'll be having to make some dinner fairly soon. But I could definitely, if you want to provide some screenshots and explanations in text, I can certainly get back to you within the next day or so with a response. If not, then maybe I could try to find some time to do screen sharing, but I usually do that kind of live voice chat consulting at a certain hourly rate. But I'm happy to respond text, video, even video. If you want to record a quick video and throw that in the Discord server, I'll respond to you and respond to that with some text and images and screenshots of a basic setup if applicable, as soon as I'm able to. And as to minimizing the hip rotating, if you're speaking to the swiveling we were seeing earlier, that's kind of what I was thinking about trying to get to eventually with this setup. The UUS animation set has hip facing, has animations that are separated out for hips forward into motion and backwards into motion, and it has coverage for both hips backward left and right and hips forward left and right. And so what we kind of encountered there was hips forward into motion and hips backward into motion, left and right strafing animations. And so the approach I could take, like going forward with this, would be either to have some hip spacing specific logic and have things separated out into databases, or to just only deal with a set number of animations and kind of discard like left strafing with hips facing forward into motion and right strafing with hips facing backward, and just keep the other two, and make it kind of more similar to the Lyra coverage, but get the additional 45-degree and 135-degree animations, which would probably be the simpler and better approach to try to keep this relatively short for testing motion matching with standard animation set. So that's probably what I'll do in the next stream, as opposed to the direction I kind of started to go in. Those would be two sort of broad approaches. I don't have a lot of experience with the network replication of the animation. It's something I'm planning on looking into very, very soon for the series I'm working on. But I can give you a quick rundown in that the key to it is going to be replicating any values your animation blueprint takes in related that might, like the character movement component is replicated by default and should replicate its values so that, but if you're inserting any values into the animation blueprint that aren't coming directly from the character movement component, then you'll have to replicate them properly. Since the animation instance isn't replicated, it's calculated client-side for like every character on screen. And so the character movement component values get replicated going into it, kind of allow that to work. And if you have other values going in, you'll need to replicate them separately. And I haven't spent much time with replication in the engine, so I can't get more specific than that. Though there are some great resources out there from like a deeper understanding of the C++ side of the character movement component and how it handles replication and implementing different gates, to just more general replication videos on just how to replicate variables and what should be done client-side and server-side. And that would probably give you the knowledge you need as far as how to get whatever inputs you have to your animation blueprint replicated. Using my system as an example, like the gate in my video series isn't replicated, so that's not going to work. It's calculated in the character class, the third-person character blueprint. It isn't replicated, and it's kind of being sent straight into the animation graph, and that will cause issues. I haven't done any sort of test, but I know that will not work and cause issues in multiplayer. So it's on my plan to address that and replicate that properly. But I can't be of too much help there, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, definitely send me a message, Shadowfall, and I'll be happy to take a look. Either later this evening or at some point tomorrow. Yeah. Physics makes everything extremely complicated. Physics can be very difficult to get working. Especially because Unreal's physics is is not. I could think of the word every other time, but my mind is blinking. And it's, gosh, it's such like a common word. It's a very, like, I'd say it's a basic part of my vocabulary. Deterministic. There we go. Took me a minute to come up with it. Unreal's physics aren't deterministic, and so that can cause issues too, because they don't have a good, like, a generalized rollback replication system. But that is something that's on their roadmap to get to eventually in the future, so hopefully they do. Yeah, I've looked into that side of things before, and it can be quite challenging to get working in multiplayer environments without kind of on the ledge of impossible, depending on what you're trying to use physics for, without getting into the C++ and doing some of your own custom work. At least from what I've seen. I haven't given it a shot yet, but that's what I've kind of come across with the information that I've read through on the internet. So I'll either go back to the root motion AI-generated animations next week, or try to wrap this up within a couple of hours next week with the UUS or Lyra animations, kind of get to something somewhat complete. End goal is still AI-generated animations and coverage, and building out a more complete motion match system in preparation for a video series on that. But I'm open to suggestions in the meantime. Yep, that will work. The unlisted will allow anyone who has the link to see the link. I mean, to see the video. So if you have it uploaded as an unlisted video and send the link, anyone who has the link can see. Going through that link can see the video. So that will certainly work. So, alright everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end out the stream here. Sorry it got a bit dull towards the end there. And, well, I should be back next week. So I'll see you guys then, or in the Discord between now and then. And I'll be having at least one more normal video out between now and the next stream.